Chapter 4. The Root of the Problem. The truth of suffering, the Buddha said, must be explored to its end. On the night that he was to attain enlightenment, he sat down with the determination not to rise until he had understood how suffering originates and how it can be eradicated. Suffering defined. Clearly, he saw, suffering exists. This is an inescapable fact, no matter how unpalatable it may be. Suffering begins with the beginning of life. We have no conscious recollection of existence within the confines of the womb, but the common experience is that we emerge from it crying. Birth is a great trauma. Having started life, we are all bound to encounter the sufferings of sickness and old age. Yet no matter how sick we may be, no matter how decayed and decrepit, none of us wants to die, because death is a great misery. Every living creature must face all these sufferings. And as we pass through life, we are bound to encounter other sufferings, various types of physical or mental pain. We become involved with the unpleasant and separated from the pleasant. We fail to get what we want. Instead, we get what we do not want. All these situations are suffering. These instances of suffering are readily apparent to anyone who thinks about it deeply. But the future Buddha was not to be satisfied with the limited explanations of the intellect. He continued probing within himself to experience the real nature of suffering, and he found that attachment to the five aggregates is suffering. At a very deep level, suffering is the inordinate attachment that each one of us has developed toward this body and toward this mind, with its cognitions, perceptions, sensations, and reactions. People cling strongly to their identity, their mental and physical being, when actually there are only evolving processes. This clinging to an unreal idea of oneself, to something that in fact is constantly changing, is suffering. Attachment. There are several types of attachment. First, there is the attachment to the habit of seeking sensual gratification. An addict takes a drug because he wishes to experience the pleasurable sensation that the drug produces in him, even though he knows that by taking the drug he reinforces his addiction. In the same way, we are addicted to the condition of craving. As soon as one desire is satisfied, we generate another. The object is secondary. The fact is that we seek to maintain the state of craving continually, because this very craving produces in us a pleasurable sensation that we wish to prolong. Craving becomes a habit that we cannot break, an addiction. And just as an addict gradually develops tolerance towards his chosen drug and requires ever larger doses in order to achieve intoxication, our cravings steadily become stronger the more we seek to fulfill them. In this way, we can never come to the end of craving. And so long as we crave, we can never be happy. Another great attachment is to the I, the ego, the image we have of ourselves. For each of us, the I is the most important person in the world. We behave like a magnet surrounded by iron filings. It will automatically arrange the filings in a pattern centered on itself. And with just as little reflection, we all instinctively try to arrange the world according to our liking, seeking to attract the pleasant and to repel the unpleasant. But none of us is alone in the world. One I is bound to come into conflict with another. The pattern each seeks to create is disturbed by the magnetic fields of others, and we ourselves become subject to attraction or repulsion. The result can only be unhappiness, suffering. Nor do we limit attachment to the I. We extend it to mind, whatever belongs to us. We each develop great attachment to what we possess, because it is associated with us. It supports the image of I. This attachment would cause no problem if what one called mine were eternal, and the I remained to enjoy it eternally. But the fact is that sooner or later the I is separated from the mine. The parting time is bound to come. When it arrives, the greater the clinging to mine, the greater the suffering will be. And attachment extends still further to our views and our beliefs. No matter what their actual content may be, no matter whether they are right or wrong, if we are attached to them, they will certainly make us unhappy. We are each convinced that our own views and traditions are the best and become very upset whenever we hear them criticized. If we try to explain our views and others do not accept them, again we become upset. We fail to recognize that each person has his or her own beliefs. It is futile to argue about which view is correct. More beneficial would be to set aside any preconceived notions and to try to see reality. But our attachment to views prevents us from doing so, keeping us unhappy. Finally, there is attachment to religious forms and ceremonies. We tend to emphasize the external expressions of religion more than their underlying meaning, and to feel that anyone who does not perform such ceremonies cannot be a truly religious person. We forget that without its essence, the formal aspect of religion is an empty shell. Piety in reciting prayers or performing ceremonies is valueless if the mind remains filled with anger, passion, and ill will. To be truly religious, we must develop the religious attitude, purity of heart, love, and compassion for all. But our attachment to the external forms of religion leads us to give more importance to the letter of it than the spirit. We miss the essence of religion and therefore remain miserable. All our sufferings, whatever they may be, are connected to one or another of these attachments. Attachment and suffering are always found together. Conditioned arising. The chain of cause and effect by which suffering originates. What causes attachment? How does it arise? Analyzing his own nature, the future Buddha found that it develops because of the momentary mental reactions of liking and disliking. The brief, unconscious reactions of the mind are repeated and intensified moment after moment, growing into powerful attractions and repulsions, into all our attachments. Attachment is merely the developed form of the fleeting reaction. This is the immediate cause of suffering. What causes reactions of liking and disliking? Looking deeper, he saw that they occur because of sensation. We feel a pleasant sensation and start liking it. We feel an unpleasant sensation and start disliking it. Now, why these sensations? What causes them? Examining still further within himself, he saw that they arise because of contact. Contact of the eye with a vision, contact of the ear with a sound, contact of the nose with an odor, contact of the tongue with a taste, contact of the body with something tangible, contact of the mind with any thought, emotion, idea, imagination, or memory. Through the five physical senses and the mind we experience the world. Whenever an object or phenomenon contacts any of these six bases of experience, a sensation is produced, pleasant or unpleasant. And why does contact occur in the first place? The future Buddha saw that because of the existence of the six sensory bases, contact is bound to occur. The five physical senses and the mind. The world is full of countless phenomena. Sights, sounds, odors, flavors, textures, various thoughts and emotions. So long as our receivers are functioning, contact is inevitable. Then why do the six sensory bases exist? Because they are essential aspects of the flow of mind and matter. And why this flow of mind and matter? What causes it to occur? The future Buddha understood that the process arises because of consciousness, the act of cognition which separates the world into the knower and the known, subject and object, I and other. From this separation results identity, birth. Every moment consciousness arises and assumes a specific mental and physical form. In the next moment, again, consciousness takes a slightly different form. Throughout one's existence, consciousness flows and changes. At last comes death, but consciousness does not stop there. Without any interval, in the next moment, it assumes a new form. From one existence to the next, life after life, the flow of consciousness continues. Then what causes this flow of consciousness? He saw that it arises because of reaction. The mind is constantly reacting, and every reaction gives impetus to the flow of consciousness so that it continues to the next moment. The stronger reaction, the greater the impetus that it gives. The slight reaction of one moment sustains the flow of consciousness only for a moment. But if that momentary reaction of liking and disliking intensifies into craving or aversion, it gains in strength and sustains the flow of consciousness for many moments, for minutes, for hours. And if the reaction of craving and aversion intensifies still further, it sustains the flow for days, for months, perhaps for years. And if throughout life one keeps repeating and intensifying certain reactions, they develop a strength sufficient to sustain the flow of consciousness not only from one moment to the next, from one day to the next, from one year to the next, but from one life to the next. And what causes these reactions? Observing at the deepest level of reality, he understood that reaction occurs because of ignorance. We are unaware of the fact that we react, and unaware of the real nature of what we react to. We are ignorant of the impermanent, impersonal nature of our existence, and ignorant that attachment to it brings nothing but suffering. Not knowing our real nature, we react blindly. Not even knowing that we have reacted, we persist in our blind reactions and allow them to intensify. Thus we become imprisoned in the habit of reacting because of ignorance. This is how the wheel of suffering starts turning. If ignorance arises, reaction occurs. If reaction arises, consciousness occurs. If consciousness arises, mind and matter occur. If mind and matter arise, the six senses occur. If the six senses arise, contact occurs. If contact arises, sensation occurs. If sensation arises, craving and aversion occur. If craving and aversion arise, attachment occurs. If attachment arises, the process of becoming occurs. If the process of becoming arises, birth occurs. If birth arises, decay and death occur, together with sorrow, lamentation, physical and mental suffering, and tribulations. Thus arises this entire mass of suffering. By this chain of cause and effect, we have been brought into our present state of existence and face a future of suffering. At last the truth was clear to him. Suffering begins with ignorance about the reality of our true nature, about the phenomenon labeled I. And the next cause of suffering is sankhara, the mental habit of reaction. Blinded by ignorance, we generate reactions of craving and aversion, which develop into attachment, leading to all types of unhappiness. The habit of reacting is the karma, the shaper of our future, and the reaction arises only because of ignorance about our real nature. Ignorance, craving, and aversion are the three roots from which grow all our sufferings in life. The way out of suffering. Having understood suffering and its origin, the future Buddha then faced the next question: how can suffering be brought to an end? By remembering the law of karma, of cause and effect. If this exists, that occurs. That arises from the arising of this. If this does not exist, that does not occur. That ceases from the ceasing of this. Nothing happens without a cause. The cause is eradicated. There will be no effect. In this way, the process of the arising of suffering can be reversed. If ignorance is eradicated and completely ceases, reaction ceases. If reaction ceases, consciousness ceases. If consciousness ceases, mind and matter cease. If mind and matter ceases, the six senses cease. If the six senses cease, contact ceases. If contact ceases, sensation ceases. If sensation ceases, craving and aversion cease. If craving and aversion cease, attachment ceases. If attachment ceases, the process of becoming ceases. The process of becoming ceases, birth ceases. If birth ceases, decay and death cease, together with sorrow, lamentation, physical and mental suffering, and tribulations. Thus this entire mass of suffering ceases. If we put an end to ignorance, then there will be no blind reactions that bring in their wake all manner of suffering. And if there is no more suffering, then we shall experience real peace, real happiness. The wheel of suffering can change into the wheel of liberation. This is what Siddhartha Gautama did in order to achieve enlightenment. This is what he taught others to do. He said, by yourself committing wrong you defile yourself. By yourself not doing wrong you purify yourself. We are each responsible for the reactions that cause our suffering. By accepting our responsibility, we can learn how to eliminate suffering. The flow of successive existences. By the wheel of conditioned arising, the Buddha explained the process of rebirth or samsara. In the India of his time, this concept was commonly accepted as fact. For many people today, it may seem to be an alien, perhaps untenable, doctrine. Before accepting or rejecting it, however, one should understand what it is and what it is not. Samsara is the cycle of repeated existences, the succession of past and future lives. Our deeds are the force that impels us into life after life. Each life, low or high, will be as our deeds were, base or noble. In this respect, the concept is not essentially different from that of many religions that teach a future existence, where we shall receive retribution or reward for our actions in this life. The Buddha realized, however, that in even the most exalted existence, suffering can be found. Therefore we should strive not for a fortunate rebirth, since no rebirth is wholly fortunate. Our aim should rather be liberation from all suffering. When we free ourselves from the cycle of suffering, we experience an unalloyed happiness greater than any worldly pleasure. The Buddha taught a way to experience such happiness in this very life. Samsara is not the popular idea of the transmigration of a soul or self that maintains a fixed identity through repeated incarnations. This, the Buddha said, is precisely what does not happen. He insisted that there is no unchanging identity that passes from life to life. It is just as from the cow comes milk. From milk, curds. From curds, butter. From fresh butter, clarified butter. From clarified butter, the creamy skimming. When there is milk, it is not considered to be curds, or fresh butter, or clarified butter, or skimming. Similarly, at any time only the present state of existence is considered to be real, and not a past or future one. The Buddha held neither that a fixed ego principle is reincarnated in successive lives, nor that there is no past or future existence. Instead, he realized and taught that only the process of becoming continues from one existence to another, so long as our actions give impetus to the process. Even if one believes in no existence other than the present, still the wheel of conditioned arising has relevance. Every moment that we are ignorant of our own blind reactions, we create suffering which we experience here and now. If we remove the ignorance and cease reacting blindly, we shall experience the resulting peace here and now. Heaven and hell exist here and now. They can be experienced within this life, within this body. The Buddha said, even if one believes there is no other world, no future reward for good actions or punishment for evil ones, still in this very life one can live happily, by keeping oneself free from hatred, ill will, and anxiety. Regardless of belief or disbelief in past or future existences, we still face the problems of the present life, problems caused by our own blind reactions. Most important for us is to solve these problems now, to take steps toward ending our suffering by ending the habit of reaction, and to experience now the happiness of liberation. The story. The Pebbles and the Ghee. One day a young man came to the Buddha crying and crying. He could not stop. The Buddha asked him, "What is wrong, young man?"
"Sir, yesterday my old father died."
"Well, what can be done? If he has died, crying will not bring him back."
"Yes, sir, that I understand. Crying will not bring back my father. But I have come to you, sir, with a special request. Please do something for my dead father."
"What can I do for your dead father?"
"Sir, please do something. You are such a powerful person, certainly you can do it. Look, these priestlings, pardoners, and almsgatherers perform all sorts of rites and rituals to help the dead. And as soon as the ritual is performed here, the gateway of the kingdom of heaven is breached and the dead person receives entry there. He gets an entry visa. You, sir, are so powerful. If you perform a ritual for my dead father, he will not just receive an entry visa, he'll be granted a permanent stay, a green card. Please, sir, do something for him."
The poor fellow was so overwhelmed by grief that he could not follow any rational argument. The Buddha had to use another way to help him understand. So he said to him, "All right, go to the market and buy 2 earthen pots." The young man was very happy, thinking that the Buddha had agreed to perform a ritual for his father. He ran to the market and returned with 2 pots. "All right," the Buddha said, "fill 1 pot with ghee, with butter." The young man did it. "Fill the other with pebbles." He did that too. "Now close their mouths. Seal them properly." He did it. "Now place them in the pond over there." The young man did so, and both of the pots sank to the bottom. "Now," said the Buddha, "bring a big stick. Strike and break open the pots." The young man was very happy, thinking that the Buddha was performing a wonderful ritual for his father. According to ancient Indian custom, when a man dies, his son takes the dead body to the cremation ground, puts it on the funeral pyre, and burns it. When the body is half burned, The son takes a thick stick and cracks open the skull. And according to the old belief, as soon as the skull is opened in this world, the gateway of the kingdom of heaven is opened above. So now the young man thought to himself,
The body of my father was burned to ashes yesterday. As a symbol, the Buddha now wants me to break open these pots.
he was very happy with the ritual. Taking a stick as the Buddha said, the young man struck hard and broke open both the pots. At once the butter contained in one pot came up and started floating on the surface of the water. The pebbles in the other pot spilled out and remained at the bottom. Then the Buddha said, "Well, young man, this much I have done. Now call all your priestlings and miracle workers and tell them to start chanting and praying. O pebbles, come up, come up. O butter, go down, go down. Let me see how it happens."
Oh, sir, you have started joking. How is it possible, sir? The pebbles are heavier than water, they are bound to stay at the bottom. They can't come up, sir. This is the law of nature. The butter is lighter than water, it is bound to remain on the surface. It can't go down, sir. This is the law of nature.
Young man, you know so much about the law of nature, but you have not understood this natural law. If all his life your father performed deeds that were heavy like pebbles, he is bound to go down. Who can bring him up? And if all his actions were light like this butter, he is bound to go up. Who can pull him down? The earlier we understand the law of nature and start living in accordance with the law, the earlier we come out of our misery.